Welcome to Braindrop by vCom Solutions. Each episode, we talk to IT leaders and experts, explore recent projects, and learn from their triumphs and challenges. We hope today's episode provides you with a unique window into the world of IT, where creativity meets problem solving and technology drives businesses forward. I'm your host, Jethro Castillo. Now let's drop into today's conversation. Today on Braindrop by vCom Solutions, I am joined by John Rouda. John is a technical leader with over 2 decades of experience and a proven track record of creating real business impact for his organization. He also is the first guest who has a podcast of his own, titled A Geek Leader Podcast, a podcast that aims to inspire and grow IT leaders. John, thanks for being on the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
So, first things first, obviously we're going to talk a lot about tech, but I looked into you a little bit, and I know that tech isn't the only thing that kind of takes over your life. So when it's not tech, what else kind of fills up your time?
It is kids. It is three children that take up a lot of my time. I have a daughter that plays multiple sports, and I have 3 children that all play multiple sports, including martial arts. So that keeps us really busy.
Did you do sports growing up? Were you the same sort of?
I did, but not as competitive as my wife. My wife was a little bit more successful at sports than I was.
That's so funny. If you had free time, what would you kind of fill it with now?
Oh man, if I had more free time, probably something outdoors,
sure.
Kayaking or hiking or something like that.
Yeah, that's lovely. And I feel like where you're from, there's kind of a lot around you to be able to do that.
Yes, there is.
Well, so how did you, over 2 decades ago, how did you get started in IT?
Sure. So I went to college for business administration with the idea, this was like during the .com bubble or whatever they used to call it, hoping that I would start some, business, doing something. And everywhere I went, I kind of just drifted towards technology. Like I took an internship when I was a sophomore in college for a company doing marketing. And within a week of working there, they moved me to help desk because I was, solving people's problems, trying to fix computers. So it's just one of those things where I just continuously drifted in that direction. And after getting my undergraduate degree in business administration, I quickly switched and went back and got a master's in software development, started a company doing web design and web hosting, and the rest is history.
Yeah, I guess so. That's kind of cool. It's funny because I think some of the guests I've talked to is more like, I kind of wandered into this position. I was more like looking at social sciences or like business or something completely unrelated. So it's kind of, or the complete opposite, which is like, I knew this from the start. I'm a complete nerd. Like, this is it. So it's really cool to hear kind of a third option of just like, I was exploring other things, but I always kind of gravitated naturally towards tech. So that's really cool. What's your favorite part about working in tech?
It's just, seeing the changes and, always being, something new is coming up. When I was in college and taking my first computer science class, we were learning, C++ and coding in that language. And now, you're all the way out where you're not even really coding nearly as much as you did before because you have these generative tools that are creating code for you. And just seeing the, all the changes that go on is just amazing.
Yeah, I think that's one of the cool parts about tech is that you as an individual have to evolve and change too by nature. I think a lot of other sort of industries or departments, it's relatively the same throughout the course of it. One guest was like, oh yeah, finance isn't evolving, but fintech is evolving. Medicine isn't evolving. Well, it is, but like healthcare tech is evolving. And so to be a part of this industry, you really have to be someone who's willing. I mean, you even said, we code a lot, and now there's tech that makes sure we don't have to code, but we still have to understand how to prompt that so it does.
Right. We still have to be able to, and to be able to read what we get back to make sure that it's, it does what we want it to do.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that being said, right, there's so much that changes. So how do you kind of keep up to date and not fall behind? What if you want to take it like 2 weeks off? Suddenly you've missed the whole boat.
For me, the easiest way that I stay current is teaching. So I teach part-time at Winthrop University, and you don't teach for the money. I'll just go ahead and say that, especially not part-time. If you're a part-time teacher, you're not making any money, but it's really for 2 reasons. One is to stay current with what's going on, because if I'm not aware of what's, emerging in technology, my students will let me know, for sure. They're going to let me know because they are aware, because it's their future, right? It's what they're all into. And if I get to the point where I'm settling to where I'm at and feeling like, oh, I'm comfortable now, then I'm already falling behind. And they're going to let me know that and keep me on my toes, which is great. And the second reason I teach is also just I can poach good talent, right? If there's really good students there, then hopefully I can encourage them to come work for me first.
Wait, this kind of feels like a cheat code now. I was kind of nodding along, and then I realized, wait a minute, this is like, oh, I was going to ask, wow, how do you have kids and you have a job and you have a podcast? How do you possibly balance teaching? And I'm like, oh, and I get it now. It helps. I mean, obviously, it helps the kids, but it also helps you, which is incredible. When did you start teaching?
I've been teaching at Winthrop now for 15 years. So.
Oh, wow. That's awesome.
Been a while.
And when you were in college, were you somebody who did kind of tutor and like help people out around you at the same time? Or
no, not at all. So when I was in college, I didn't take notes. I was a terrible student. I got good grades, but I was a terrible student. I didn't really I was memorizing something for the test and just blowing it off.
But now when you do that when you teach the kids, you try to, how do you
it's one of those things where I try to teach them to understand how to learn and not just memorize for the test. I try to give them real world examples about the things that I learned in college are completely irrelevant and have been irrelevant for a decade, So don't try to, bank on what you're learning now. Bank on how to learn and enjoy learning so that when you get out in the real world, you can use that and go forward. Another thing that I also do is I find old students that, took my classes before and have them come back and talk about,
that's really cool.
kind of what their experience is now that they've been out of college for 5 years. Like, what is it like now?
That's really cool. And I think that's, the one thing, not the one thing, but the number one thing I did learn from college was how to learn. Because like you said, most of the things you take from there, you don't really apply, but it's that concept of learning how to learn. And some of my friends only studied for the test, and I kind of studied to just learn in general. And it's kind of interesting to see now, when we're out in the real world and we're continuing to learn without that whole academic pressure to actually give us the curriculum, you can see people going, I don't know what to do. I don't know how to improve. And I'm just like, I'm just taking it all in, So,
when we did the right thing.
Yeah, exactly. When it comes to IT and tech, it's moving so fast. What kind of excites you? But at the same time, what also might concern you or keep you up at night?
Yeah. So the easy answer is going to be AI, right? Because it's super exciting. And it's also like, is it going to replace me? Maybe. But, when I look back, I'm also a history minor. I was a history minor in college because I loved history and I love to look back on things. And you look back on the Industrial Revolution. So many people were like, oh no, this is going to take so many people's jobs. And yes, it did. We don't have blacksmiths out there and cobblers making shoes anymore, right? But we have a lot more jobs that are out there that are pay better and generate a better lifestyle. And I think that's what AI is going to do as well. So that's one thing that definitely excites me, but also concerns me a little bit because there's going to be some short term, I don't want to call it, it's going to be some impact. There's going to be some impact to some people's way of doing things, and their jobs are going to go away for sure. They're going to have to adapt. But do I think that's an adaptation for the better? Yes, absolutely.
And I think that's kind of the name of the game, I guess, not for tech, but for humans in general, is the ability to change and be open to change and adapt to change. And that's so huge in tech, and I'm probably in IT when you're trying to tell all the other departments, hey, we should be doing this. And they're like, that's a lot of change all at once. Or like, hey, we got to lock this thing down. It's like, now it's a lot harder to do my job. But I think at the end of the day, as humans, we have to adapt. And I there's a lot of apocalyptic sort of end of world fear about AI of just like, oh, shoot, we're not going to be able to work anymore. But I don't know. I like to think of it. And you're right. It's going to have short-term impact on people and we have to adapt. But also it's like, well, what if we create a world where we don't have to work, right? We can just have fun.
Right.
What if AI does that for us? And I just think that, I think the potential is something that we should lean into, but also, of course, watch and catch the bad guys and the bad players out there as well.
Yeah, and that's another thing. So with all the IoT and interconnective of everything, it's the internet of everything, basically, because everything is becoming connected. We have to worry about, breaches and how cyber attacks could, impact our daily lives. I just heard a news story this morning about the water, attack. There's attacks on water facilities here
wow.
in Texas, and in that may be coming from Iran. They're thinking, they don't know where it's coming from, but potentially there's breaches that could happen, without us being aware of it, that can affect our daily lives because of this interconnected world that we live in today.
Right. I mean, like, I don't know if you have any suggestions but like, as an individual, how do I?
No.
Yeah. Like, how do I feel safe? What do I do?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think the thing is just to, well, if you want to be happy, just ignore it all, right? But in reality, just protect yourself. Just do what you can do for your own, cyber hygiene. Make sure your own passwords are safe. Use a password manager like 1Password or LastPass or something like that you can use to just keep yourself, as safe as you can be. And if something does happen, pay attention to it. Listen to podcasts, listen to the news, listen to what's out there well, I don't know if you used to listen to the news, but listen to podcasts and talk about this stuff so that you're aware of kind of some of the things that are going on and things that people are talking about. So, if something does happen, you can be, alert.
That's so funny. Speaking of podcasts, we're on one, but you have one. And
I do, yeah.
And it's gone way longer than this has. I don't know. Are you on episode 4? Huh? What episode are you on?
Yeah, close to 4. It's like 360-ish.
So how many do you do usually? What's your cadence?
I do 1 a week.
So a year. You've been doing this for a year now.
Oh, no. Well, a lot more longer than a year. That'd be if it was daily. And I've been doing
you're right. No, you're right. My math. Oh, great. My math has been bad.
I've been doing this since 2015.
That's right.
A long time.
You've been doing it before the podcast boom. Pretty close.
Yeah.
What kind of prompted that? What started that? What inspired that?
So, I got my first job as a manager. So I got promoted out of like writing code to managing people that wrote code. And I sucked really bad at that. So I had a lot of turnover on my team, and I ended up getting a mentor. He told me I needed to like focus on leadership. So I started like reading these leadership books, like Simon Sinek's book, and watching TED Talks. And I knew I needed a way to kind of hold myself accountable to my team of doing the things that I was learning about. So I started a podcast, partly so I could talk to cool people that I normally wouldn't get a chance to talk to. That's like the number one reason to start a podcast. So
100%.
The number two reason was to hold myself accountable to my team, so that if I said I was going to do one-on-ones, like they heard me say it on a podcast, so they can be like, hey, you said you were doing this and you're not doing it, and it kind of gets back to that mentality of like, if you want to run a marathon, post on like, Facebook that you're going to go run a marathon, and then your friends can hold you accountable to doing. So this is that same mentality that I was trying to put into like being a better manager. And, I started doing it and I got hooked. I had some really cool guests. I've had, some New York Times bestselling authors. I've had some UFC fighters. I've had, Navy SEALs. So it's been a lot of fun.
That's crazy. That's cool. And I imagine you did not, obviously when you started it, you did not expect it to go where it went. So I think that's really, really incredible.
No, not at all. It was just more of I'm doing this for fun. I'm not going to make any money on it. I'm not going to get, any, I'll try to get, so there was a book that my first guest was a guy named Todd Henry, who wrote the book, The Accidental Creative, which is one of my favorite books. It's not really about tech at all, but it applies greatly to tech. It's really about creativity. And it's the fact that a lot of us went to college for a certain degree that was not a creative degree. It was not an art degree. It was not anything like that. But when we got out in the real world, we realized that our entire jobs are really creative in nature. And software is all about that. You're creating solutions to problems, you're writing code, you're doing all kinds of creative things. And, so I reached out to him and he, graciously decided to come on my show and be my first real guest. And that was a lot of fun.
That's pretty awesome. And now, not 365 days, more like 8 years strong. I gotta redeem myself. Still going strong, still loving it, still doing it.
Yeah, I still do it. I still, I record at least once a week, but post, every Friday. So that's kind of my cadence.
Oh, today. And, I get to listen to one today.
Yeah, there'll be one coming out today. So yeah.
That's really, really cool. And in terms of that realm of podcasting and kind of creating on your own, how has that evolved and grown and changed?
Well, the tools have changed for sure. Now it's a lot easier to do, honestly, than it used to be, because I use, I don't mind saying it, I use Adobe Podcast to kind of edit my shows as far as like, cleaning up a lot of the ums and the background noises and the bad sounds that come out every now and then. And it makes it a lot easier because it's like upload it, let it do its thing, then it downloads, listen to it and say, yeah, wow, that's way better than if I would have done it myself.
Yeah.
But also I learned how to templatize things. And I think templates are really important because if you're doing everything from scratch, every episode, it's a lot of work, right? If you have to do a new intro every episode, do a new outro every episode, and, find your ad breaks every episode, it's a lot of effort. But if you have that templatized where you're like, this is my intro, this is, where the ad breaks are, this is the body of the content that I'm just going to drag and drop in there once it's edited, and this is the outro, it's really easy. And then I also templatized like the show notes and the publishing and have all that kind of automated to where, I may do a 40-minute interview with someone and I'll put a total of 1 hour into the show.
When, you've been doing it for so long, how have you found yourself kind of improving, whether it's conversationally or as a leader? Because like you said, doing this has helped me kind of hold myself accountable. It's a very vulnerable thing, right, to do. So over the years, what have you learned about yourself and how have you grown?
Yeah, for sure. Listening is one thing that's really helped me because I didn't realize that I was a bad listener until, you're interviewing someone. Because you think that, when you're having a conversation or in a meeting, you're not listening as good as you should be. You're thinking about what to say next.
Yeah.
But when you're interviewing somebody, you ask them a question and you know that your next question has to be a response to what they're saying. So you have to listen. And I didn't realize that was hard until I started interviewing people. I'm like, God, this is exhausting to listen to someone. So I've learned about listening, and now I apply that to meetings to where I don't go into a meeting with an agenda of this is what I'm going to say. And I'm waiting for my time for people to stop talking so I can say that thing. Now I'm waiting and listening into it. And I think that makes me make better decisions, as a leader of our tech team, because I can, listen to the things that they're saying and not make my decisions until after I've heard the input instead of coming in there with my mind already made up.
Yeah. And that's something that I learned too, when I started doing podcasting and just having interviews and conversations in general, is I almost have to fully let go of my own ego of how I think I want to portray myself and how I think I'm right, and let them speak and then form my thoughts based off of theirs, not in a reactionary instinct way, but in a, And I think it has made me learn more, right? And be more open and grow more because I'm no longer trying to prove people wrong. I'm trying to take what they say, kind of mull with it, and then form my decision or my thoughts from that. And I think I think I'm very grateful for that. I also appreciate you saying that it's not easy. Sometimes there are some conversations where I'm stressed because I'm like, I got to be on top of my game and I have to listen to you and be able to respond with the correct question. And what if I blank? What if I don't have anything from what you said? Or what if I can't understand what you said because the internet's bad or your accent is too strong and I don't want to say anything, so I have to make something up? It can be hard.
Sometimes I've been interviewing. I was interviewing someone about AI, and this was a couple of years ago before ChatGPT was kind of mainstream, and they were talking about generative AI back then. And I'm like, I don't even know what you're saying. I don't even know what that means. So it was one of those things where I don't want to sound stupid, but I almost have to sound stupid because I have to have you. Because if I don't understand it, my audience doesn't understand it either. So we've got to dumb this down a little bit, And how do you do that nicely? How do you not say dude, can you sub it down a little bit? Because
I think something, because I experience that all the time. I was like, am I going to ask a dumb question? Is this going to be embarrassing? But I think I like to pretend that I act as the audience surrogate, right? I'm them. I'm not the person who's also the expert. I'm just them. And so I can ask every question that I want to ask because if I want to know, they probably want to know. And so what does it mean to you to be a good leader? When you moved into management, you were like, I'm not good. And that means you were aware of that and you knew that. And so now that you knew then what it was like to not be a good leader, what does it mean to you now to be one?
That's a great question. And to be fair, I did not know it when I first moved into management. I learned it by people quitting. So that was something that I was kind of, and actually it took me a while to figure it out. So I had people quit. I had this high turnover rate. And my company was gracious enough to assign us mentors as new managers. So I had a mentor, and he was a SVP sales, actually, which is completely different than tech. But he gave me a lot of insight about what was going on. And one of the things, I went to him one day and said, look, I had 2 people quit today. This is of a team of 6. So I only had 6 people reporting to me. A third of them quit in one day. So he's like, why did they quit? I was like, well, they're going to one of the banks because the bank pay better than we do, And he's just shook his head. I go, what are you shaking your head for? He's like, that's not why they quit. I'm like, well, that's what they told me. He's like, well, of course they don't want to hurt your feelings. Like, what do you mean they don't want to hurt my feelings? He's like, people don't quit their job for like a 10% raise. They're not going to quit their job for a small raise. They're quitting their jobs because they don't like their management, or they don't like their leadership, or they don't like where they're at. And all of that comes back to you. You're their leader. So if they're not happy in their environment, they're leaving because of you. It's like, and in reality, would you leave your job that you're happy with for a 10% raise to go somewhere where you're not sure if you're going to like it or not?
Right.
And honestly, in our area, that at the time, banks had a bad reputation of like not being a good place to work. That's legacy technology. They weren't, advancing. And I was like, you know what? You're absolutely right. It's got to be something that I'm doing. I got to be able to fix this. So that's kind of how I figured it out. But then going back to your question about what makes a good leader, I think it's humility is a big one. Having that ability to not let your ego get in the way. As Ryan Holiday says, ego is the enemy. And you've got to be able to like think about, how do I keep my ego out of this? And it's hard to do because, as I do, if you're like good at writing code, you're good at doing something, and then you become the manager of those people, you think they're all should be as good as you, and that they're not. But that's not true. They all just have different ways of doing it. You've got to be able to put your different lenses of diversity on and think about different perspectives and different things that are going on, and realize that they have a different perspective of this, and their way, is different. It may not be better. It may not be worse. It's just different, and that's okay. And also to understand that as a leader, if you're always, micromanaging and trying to get down into the weeds and not giving people freedom to do their jobs, you don't scale. Your team can't scale. And if you want to be a good leader for your business, you can grow that business, you have to scale. And scalability is extremely important, and micromanaging does not scale.
Yeah. I really like that, in the sense that you can be the best individual contributor, the best software developer, all you want. But in order to scale and grow, you need to be able to pass that on to the next group of people, and also allow them to shine and grow in the way that they can shine and grow. Obviously, you said you read a lot of books, and your mentor was very kind of just straight with you. He pretty much said, these people are willing to go to the banks to get away from you. Not to be kind of aggressive there, but what were the steps that you took to kind of make that shift and make that change from that point?
Yeah. So I think the number one step was just, honesty, and just, being open with my team and talking to them and saying, look, I'm new at this. I don't know what I'm doing. Help me out. And, I had one really good employee named Robert that came to me, and he said, one of the things you're doing that, really stresses me out is you're constantly pinging me with things. Like, you're sending me messages after messages about, hey, what about this? What about this? What about this? He's like, I can't get my job done because I'm stopping to reply to you because you're the boss, right? I'm going to reply to you. He's like, can you like maybe batch those requests and just do it like once a day or something like that? And I'm like, oh yeah, I should batch requests. And then I started thinking, like, what if I treat, my individuals the way I want to be treated? And that's, sounds very obvious. That's what you should be doing. But it's very different when you're managing someone. You don't think about like, I want to do what I wish my boss would do. Instead you do what your boss does to you. You don't think about like, I want to do what I wish my boss would. And, what I wish my boss would do would leave me alone, let me do my job, back off a little bit and just set a strategy and a vision for me, and then hold me accountable to the things that I'm supposed to do so that I grow, and give me those opportunities to grow. So I had to kind of step out of like day-to-day work, which is what I love doing. I love to write the code. I love building things. And I had to say, like, I got to step out of this. But also I wanted to keep myself current, like you talked about before. So I started this thing called Fun Day Friday. So Monday through Thursday, I'm stepping out of your world. Like, we'll still have our daily stand-ups, we'll have our meetings, we'll talk about things, but I'm not going to get involved in your code. I'm not going to do anything. But on Friday, I'm going to do something on my own. I'm going to either play around with, I'm going to check out some user stories and start writing some code myself, or I'm going to go help desk do something. I'm going to, check out some firewall logs with the cybersecurity folks. I'm going to do something that's like getting my hands dirty on Fridays. And that's going to be my Fun Day Friday.
That's cool. I like that as an idea, as a concept in general. I think the thing that really stuck out to me though was, to be a good leader, you asked your employees, hey, what can I do to be better? Because I think, there are general catch-all ways to be a good leader, but at the end of the day, a good leader knows what his people wants and needs and how they work and how they operate. And so again, it's that learning to listen, that humility, right? Meeting them where they're at and allowing them to grow. I think that to me, from what I've heard, because I've not, I wouldn't say I have decades of experience in leadership or anything. But I think that's something that's always stuck with me is to really be a good leader, a good friend, a good person. You got to listen and you got to know what they need from you. And that's asking the right
And
question.
it's hard to ask. It's hard to ask, when you're a boss, it's hard to go to your people and say like, what can I do to be better?
Yeah.
And, it's hard for them to answer. So when they answer, you don't ever need to be defensive. You got to always just like,
right.
Take it all in and say, thank you,
Right.
Because imagine your boss coming to you and saying, how can I be better? And you're like, I don't want to tell you that you suck at this thing. It's really hard to do that.
Right. It's that power balance, right? And then especially if you respond poorly to their feedback, they're never going to give you feedback ever again.
Right.
And so it's that humility, like you said. Well, with that being said, and you kind of already named a lot of learning moments, so maybe you don't, I don't want to ask a question where you're like, I ran out, but what are some other kind of learning moments in your career that you'd kind of like to impart? Kind of like when your alumni come back and tell everyone what they learned from leaving college.
Yeah. So one of the things that really like stands out to me as a time to learn is when you get to do things that are new that you haven't done before, and you get to see them done right from someone else. So one of the things that I'd never been a part of was like a large acquisition. And I've been a part of smaller acquisitions and I've seen them done, incorrectly and I've seen them done correctly. But then going through a large acquisition, you get to see like the bigger scope of things, like not just migrating certain systems over, but also like user accounts and changing business processes and things like that are kind of outside the scope of tech, but tech's very involved in it. And just seeing like, oh, wow, this is much larger than that before. And being able to see something that, someone else kind of running it, but you're there, watching it is really, I think, helpful to learn how to get to the next level. Because if you don't get to see what's above your level, like if you're a director, you don't get to see what the VPs are doing and the CIOs are doing, it's really hard to kind of get moved into that level.
Yeah, like if you don't know if you have never experienced what the potential is, you have no idea what the potential is, if that makes sense. Like you don't know where to go because you haven't seen it.
Yeah, like so I can go back to I didn't realize that, when you're head of a department or head of the entire tech org, how big budgets are, as a manager, when I was managing web development and mobile development, I didn't have to deal with budgets. My boss handled budgets. It's like, just go do your job, get the projects done. You didn't have to worry about like, what's the ROI of this and all these like, budgetary things. And then when you get in charge of an entire department, you're like, oh, this is my salary budget. This is my, refresh budget. This is my repair budget. This is my shipping budget. Like, what is this? This is my travel budget. I got all these little things I got to like manage now that I didn't even think about. I always thought if I want to go to a conference, I just go. Now I'm like, oh, I've got to budget this. I've got, you can't go, but you can go.
Yeah.
It's tough.
Right. And I think that's also the other reality too, is that, I forget who said this to me, but it was like when I'm like when I'm managing employees, there's kind of two tracks you can go, right? You can go the managerial route, or you can become the best contributor, software developer ever.
Correct.
And management's not for everybody, because you realize you let go of the day to day, and then you go into this different role where you have to do all these things, where you suddenly have to be a person who has to look at people and go, okay, how do I allocate you almost accordingly? And it's such a different look. So, I really like that. The importance of shadowing, right? The importance of seeing what other people are doing. Lots of learning, and your humility is coming out. But what are some of your success stories in your career? What are the things that you're like, that is something I'm very proud of, and I did that?
From an individual standpoint, there's a couple of things. One, I'm just going to go through my allocates, or what do you call it? Anyway, I don't usually do this. I don't usually brag about anything because I don't like to. But getting adjunct professor of the year one year, that was like one of my favorite things to do, because that's one of those things that you're nominated by students, but voted on by your peers, and it's like, okay, I'm really proud of that. That was a cool moment. I made an app that went live on when my daughter was born in 2010, an iOS app, and that little stupid app is still today, making, money off of ad revenue, still getting thousands of downloads a day. It's still like, it's had millions and millions of downloads, and that little stupid app is still like one of those things that I'm proud of. And I've met people for the first time and talked to them, and they're like, "Oh, so I heard you build apps." I'm like, "Yeah, like what's an app you built?" And I told them, they're like, "I have that on my phone." That's like so cool, to when you run into somebody that has, your app on their phone. And it's kind of like,
that's surreal. That's kind of
moment.
surreal. Yeah. Anything else? Any other bragging moments?
Yeah. So I was giving a talk at a conference in 2020, and I wasn't thinking anything of it. And it was before I even gave the talk. I was walking down the hallway to go to the session, and someone saw me and said, Hey, I know you." And I'm like, okay, I didn't know who the person was. And he's like, "I listen to your podcast." And I'm like, "What?" Like, when you meet somebody in the wild that has heard you talk before, it's kind of random. That's a cool thing.
You wanna plug your app?
Sure. It's called Bubble Pops. It's just a little stupid game where you
it's like,
little bubble.
I don't have it, but I know people who play it. So
Yeah. So it's just Bubble Pops.
that's cool. That's cool. What was the inspiration? You just were like, I want to make a game.
I don't know. I was managing a web team at the time, and my boss, our CIO, came to me and it's like, "Hey, we're going to get into mobile development." And I worked for a company that did internet service provider. They were also a security company, so we did like home security. So we're going to build like an app where you could arm and disarm your house and stuff. And this is 15 years ago, so a while back, where you could do all that from your smartphone. So he said, "Your team's going to be doing mobile." And I knew, iPhone it came out just 2 years earlier. So like nobody had mobile development experience. So I was like, well, I better learn how to do this. If I want to manage people doing it, I need to know how to do it. So I'm going to come up with something just to put it out there. And, I made a bunch of like really dumb games where I would take existing source code and kind of like, open source libraries and turn it into an app. And, so I made like a solitaire game that didn't look very good. And I made, like a dice game or something. And I was like, yeah, these are all stupid. And then eventually I learned how to do certain things and got a little bit better at it and made Bubble Pops and put it out there. And I've updated it from time to time and added a couple more things into it, but it's not like apps today, like new apps today that have all this. It's got very rough animation and very rough, things into it compared to a lot of other apps, but it's been out there for a long time. So.
It's honestly really inspiring for me just to hear you kind of, and this is why I think, you said you don't talk about yourself a lot, you don't brag a lot. I think this is why it's so important for people to celebrate their accomplishments and their achievements, not for themselves, but for other people to be inspired to realize, oh, that person that I look up to, or that person that is doing some really cool things, did that, and that means I can too. And so I really appreciate you kind of sharing the things that you're proud of, because I think as humble as you are and as much as you've learned, I think it's really cool to hear somebody who I believe to be authentically and truly humble to really be happy and proud about some things. I think that's just really, really awesome. So thanks for sharing that.
Well, thank you.
We talked a lot about the past. As we kind of close this podcast, I kind of want to look ahead. What are some of your kind of goals and projects moving forward? What are the next things you kind of want to achieve and accomplish?
Yeah, so that's a great question. And I think at this point in my career, I'm getting, I don't want to say near the end, but, I've got probably another, 10 or 15 years in me before I retire. And my goal is to retire and teach full time.
Nice.
Or not full time, but be only a teacher. Because, I've seen so many people retire and kind of just, I don't know, let themselves go. And, I don't want to do that. But, in about 10 years, my kids will be out of the house, all, in college or out of college by then. And, I'll just want to stop working at 9 to 5 and just get into teaching and enjoying life and traveling. And I think that's kind of the next on my bucket list of things to do. I do want to continue to do the podcast, at least for, the time being, because I love doing it. I love talking to cool people and love doing this, what we're doing right here. And, I should, by the end of next month, have like my 2 millionth download. So I'm pretty excited about that.
Wow.
Just, hoping to keep pushing that forward.
Wow. You got cool milestones to celebrate. That's awesome. That's awesome. How is it being on the other side of a podcast? How is it being a guest and answering questions rather than listening and asking questions?
It's really a lot of the same because we're just having a good conversation here, and it does feel like I'm talking more than I'm used to talking, but that's okay.
No, yeah. I usually am not on the other end, so I'm like, I don't know if I could do the other end. I feel like I'd be like, I don't want to talk about anything about me. But again, I really appreciate you coming on. I do have one final question, and that's more just kind of a wrap-up question for you. Is there anything you kind of want to share that you haven't really shared, whether that's advice or thoughts or a story or anything like that with the audience today?
Yeah. So one of the things that I can think of is don't ever, sell yourself short. You can accomplish anything you want to as long as you put in the effort. And you may say, I'm not as talented as other people. And, I've never been the most talented developer. I've never been the most talented, engineer. But you don't have to be the most talented. Effort will trump talent, every day of the week, as long as you put in the effort. And, I try to tell my kids that, when it comes to sports, they'll say, well, I'm not the most talented. Well, put in the effort. If you put in the effort, you will trump the talent. So no matter what you want to do in life, whether it's teaching, whether it's podcasting, whether it's, writing code or playing sports, put in the effort.
Well, John, thank you so much for your time today. That was a lovely conversation. To me, at least, for the nature of this podcast, a very unique one, and selfishly one that I'm glad to have had because I get to finally talk to someone who's a fellow podcaster. And so this is just a refreshing conversation for me. So John, again, thank you for your time, and I wish you all the best. And let's keep in touch for sure.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you so much.
All right.
Had a lot of fun.
Yeah, me too. vCom Solutions is here to help make your IT projects and day-to-day operations as easy and efficient as possible. If you'd like to see how vCom can help your organization save time and money, request a demo at vcomsolutions.com/demo. Do you work in IT? Be a guest on Braindrop. Go to vcomsolutions.com/Braindrop guest to sign up. Thanks again for dropping in. Don't forget to subscribe, and you can find us on social media at vCom Solutions. Until next time.